Picture the scene. You already know it. The whole world is water, gray and endless, no land anywhere. A single wooden boat rides the swell, crammed with animals 2 by 2 and one frightened family. The rain has finally stopped, and a man leans out over the rail and opens his hands, and a bird flies up off his palm, out across the drowned world, searching for any scrap of dry land. You have known this story since you were a child. The Ark. The Flood. The bird sent out over the water. There is just one problem. The man holding that bird is not Noah. His boat is not long and ark-shaped. It is a giant cube. The gods who sent the flood did not do it because people were wicked. And his story, every beat of it, the warning, the boat, the animals, the flood, the mountain, the bird, was carved into wet clay more than 1,000 years before a single word of the story, was ever written down. The flood you grew up with is real, and it is sacred to billions of people, and it is one of the most beautiful stories humanity has ever told. But it is not the first flood. It is not even close. And by the end of this, you are going to understand something genuinely strange about your own species. Because nearly every culture on Earth, separated by oceans by thousands of years, tells a version of this exact story. The question is not just which one came first. The question is why we all remember a flood at all. So let me take you back to the original, the real first draft. And to the afternoon a quiet man in London read it and very nearly lost his mind. The year is 1872. A museum in the heart of London is stacked, floor to ceiling, with broken pieces of clay. Tens of thousands of fragments dug out of the sands of what is now Iraq. Scratched all over with the oldest writing on Earth, a script of little wedge-shaped marks called cuneiform. Almost nobody alive can read it. One of the few who can is a young man named George Smith, largely self-taught, who spends his days bent over these shattered tablets, piecing a dead language back together one sliver at a time. And one afternoon he is cleaning the grime off a particular fragment, reading as he goes, when the words start to come together into a sentence. A boat coming to rest on a mountain. A man sending out a dove, and the dove finding no resting place and coming back. Smith realizes he is reading a flood story far, far older than the Bible. And according to the people who were there, he leaps up from the table, and in his overwhelming excitement, he starts tearing off his clothes, running around the room, the most famous moment in the history of reading anything, because he understood instantly what he was holding. He was holding proof that the flood was not born in the pages of Scripture. It was already ancient when Scripture was young. What Smith had found was a piece of the Epic of Gilgamesh. And here is where it gets good, because the flood is not even the main story. It is a flashback, a story told inside a bigger story. So let me set the stage properly. Gilgamesh is a king, the mightiest king of the ancient world, 2/3 god and 1/3 man, ruler of the great city of Uruk. And Gilgamesh is destroyed by a single fear, the same fear that sits quietly in the back of your own mind right now. He is terrified of dying. His best friend has just died in his arms, and Gilgamesh has looked at the body and thought, this is coming for me too, and he cannot accept it. So he sets out on a desperate journey to the ends of the earth to find the one person who beat death, the only human being ever granted eternal life, a man named Utnapishtim. And when Gilgamesh finally finds him, exhausted and ragged at the edge of the world, he asks the obvious question, how? How did you, a mortal man, become immortal? And Utnapishtim answers by telling him a secret. He says, I will reveal to you a hidden thing. And he begins to describe the day the gods drowned the world. Long ago, he says, the gods lived alongside humanity, and humanity had grown, cities swelled, people multiplied, and here's the first place the story flips everything you assumed. In the older Mesopotamian telling, the one called the Atrahasis epic, the gods do not send the flood because people are sinful. They send it because people are loud. Listen to that again, because it is so strange and so human. Humanity had become so numerous and so noisy, the constant din of all those people, their chatter, their work, their crowds, that the chief god Enlil could not sleep. The racket of the human race kept the gods awake. And so, irritated, exhausted, the way you feel about a neighbor's party at 3 a.m, the gods decided to wipe the slate clean. Not justice, not punishment for evil, just annoyance, scaled up to the end of the world. I should be honest here, because this channel does not tidy up the past. The Gilgamesh version is brief about the reason. It is the older Atrahasis poem that spells out the noise, the overcrowding, the gods losing patience. But that is the root the whole tradition grows from. The first flood was not about a wicked world. It was about a crowded, noisy one. And here is something most people never hear. The flood was not even the gods' first attempt. In the Atrahasis poem, Enlil tries to thin out the human race again and again before he ever reaches for the water. First, he sends a plague to sweep through the cities. But clever Ea whispers to his favorite mortal how to weather it, and humanity survives and recovers and grows loud again. So Enlil sends a drought, and then a long famine, the rains held back, the fields cracking to dust, the people starving in the streets. And each time Ea finds a loophole, a way to keep his humans alive, and each time the race bounces back, more crowded and more deafening than before. It is only when nothing else is worked that a furious Enlil escalates to the final answer, the one thing that leaves nothing behind at all. Hold on to that, the plague, the drought, the famine he tried first, because it is going to come back and matter enormously at the very end of this story. Now the gods swear a great oath. None of them is allowed to warn the humans. Mankind will simply drown. All of them, with no idea it is coming. But there is one god who cannot stomach it. Ea, the god of wisdom and fresh water, the cleverest of them all, has a favorite among the mortals, Utnapishtim. And Ea finds a loophole so sneaky it is almost funny. He has sworn not to tell the man. So he does not tell the man. Instead, he goes to the reed wall of Utnapishtim's house, and he speaks to the wall. He warns the wall. He tells the fence in a loud, clear voice about the coming flood and exactly how to survive it, while the man inside just happens to be listening on the other side. Technically, Ea kept his oath. He never said a word to a human. He told the architecture. And what does the wall say to do? Tear down your house, it says, and build a boat. Abandon your possessions and save your life. And then it gives the dimensions, and this is the detail that should stop you cold, because it is nothing like the boat in your head. This is not a long, tapering arc. Utnapishtim is told to build a perfect cube, a vessel with equal sides, the length the same as the width, the same as the height, divided into 7 decks stacked one on top of another, each deck split into 9 compartments. A floating cube of a building, sealed against the water with tar and pitch. The townspeople watch him do it, of course. A man tearing down his home to build an enormous cube in the dry season. They ask what on earth he is doing. And Ea has given him a cover story, a slippery double-meaning answer to keep the peace. He tells them he can no longer live among them because the great god Enlil is angry with him, so he is leaving to go dwell with Ea, his patron, down in the waters. He lets them believe blessings are coming, a rain of plenty. He does not tell them it is the end. When the cube is finished, he loads it. He brings aboard his family. He brings the craftsmen, the skilled workers. He brings his gold and his silver. And he brings, in his own words, the seed of all living things. All the animals of the field, wild and tame, herded up the ramp into the decks of the cube. And then, on that last dry evening, he he does something that breaks your heart a little. He throws a feast. He slaughters oxen and sheep for the workmen who built his boat. He pours out wine and ale like river water, and they eat and drink as if it were a holiday, none of them knowing it is the last meal of the world. When it is done, his boatman seals the hatch from the outside, battening down the great cube, shutting them all in, and Utnapishtim waits, and the storm comes. When dawn breaks, a black cloud rises on the horizon. The god of storms rides inside it. The poem describes the gods of the deep tearing up the anchor posts of the world, and the dams of heaven breaking open. The light turns to darkness. The land shatters like a clay pot. The wind and the flood roll over the people, and the poem says, "You could not see one person from another. Even the gods are terrified by what they have unleashed. They flee up to the highest heaven, the home of the sky god," and the poem gives us this unforgettable image. The gods cowering against the outer wall, crouched down like dogs, whimpering. And the goddess Ishtar, who had agreed to the flood, begins to wail. She cries out that she should never have spoken for this in the council of the gods, that she has watched her own people fill the sea like fish. The gods weep with her. They had not understood what they were doing until they watched it happen. The makers of the flood sit and sob over the drowning of the world. For 6 days and 7 nights the wind and the water rage, and then, on the 7th day, it stops. The sea goes still. The storm falls quiet, and Utnapishtim opens a single hatch, and light falls on his face, and he looks out, and there is nothing. It's just flat water in every direction, calm as a rooftop. All of humanity, every voice that had kept the gods awake, has gone silent and turned to clay. And the poem says he sat down and wept, the tears running down his face, the only man left to cry. Then, in the distance, something breaks the surface. A mountain. The boat had run aground on a peak called Mount Nemush, and it held there, fast, while the waters slowly began to fall. He waits one day, then another, the mountain holding the cube steady. And on the 7th day, he runs the experiment you already know. He reaches for the birds. First, he brings out a dove, and he releases it. The dove flies out over the water, finds no place to land, no branch, no shore, and comes circling back to the boat. Then he sends a swallow, and the swallow, too, finds nowhere to rest and returns. And finally, he sends out a raven, and the raven flies, and the raven sees that the waters have pulled back, that there is mud, that there is food, and the raven eats and circles and does not come back. And that is how Utnapishtim knows the world has come back up for air. Stop and feel that for a second, because this is the moment that made George Smith tear his clothes off in a London museum. The bird sent out over the water to find dry land. It is in the story you grew up with, almost beat for beat. Now, the details are not identical, and the differences are their own kind of fascinating. In the version most of us know, the order in the birds are not quite the same. A raven first, then a dove sent more than once. The mountains have different names. But the shape of the scene, a survivor on a boat, releasing birds one by one to test a drowned world, is unmistakably the same scene, written down in the mud of a rock 1,000 years earlier. And then comes the ending, and it is so human it aches. Utnapishtim steps out onto the mountain, and the first thing he does is make an offering. He builds an altar and burns sweet reeds and cedar and myrtle, and the gods up in their heaven smell it. And remember, they have just killed every human on earth, which means they have killed everyone who used to feed them with offerings. The gods are starving. So when that first thread of sweet smoke rises up, the poem says the gods gathered over the sacrifice like flies, desperate. They had drowned their own food supply, and now one small altar is all that is left. And then Enlil arrives, the god who ordered it all, and he is furious, not with grief, with rage that someone survived at all. Who let a human live? But Ea, the clever one who whispered to the wall, steps forward and scolds him, and his argument is the moral heart of the whole tale. You should not have sent a flood, Ea says. A flood is too much. If you are angry that there are too many people, send a lion to thin them, send a wolf, send a famine, send a plague. Punish the wrongdoer, not the entire world. Do not drown everything because some of it troubled you. It is, thousands of years early, an argument about whether collective punishment is ever just. And notice what Ea is really saying. The lion, the wolf, the famine, the plague, those were the very tools Enlil reached for first, back before the flood. The targeted, partial punishments that left a world still standing. Ea is telling him he already had the right answer in his hands, and he threw it away for the overkill that drowned everyone. And the gods, chastened, agree never to do it again. And then Enlil does something unexpected. He goes aboard the boat, he takes Utnapishtim and his wife by the hand, he has them kneel, and he touches their foreheads and he blesses them. Until now, he says, you were human. From this moment, you and your wife will be like us, the gods. And he sends them away to live forever at the mouth of the rivers, at the edge of the world. That is the secret Utnapishtim has been telling Gilgamesh this whole time. That is how a mortal man became immortal. He did not earn it with virtue. He survived the end of the world, and immortality was the strange, sad consolation prize for being the last man alive. Now pull back, because here is the bigger picture, the thing that should genuinely unsettle you. The Gilgamesh flood is not even the oldest version. Behind it stands the Atrahasis epic, older still. And behind that, older again, a Sumerian poem about a king named Ziusudra warned by the gods to build a great boat. The flood story is a family. A bloodline of stories, each one copied and reshaped and handed down for 1,000 years before it ever reached the famous telling you know. And it did not stop there. The Greeks told it too, a couple named Deucalion and Pyrrha riding out a divine flood in a wooden chest. You find flood survivors in India, in the Americas, in China, in the islands of the Pacific. Hundreds of flood stories scattered across a planet that had no way to share them. So why? Why does almost every culture on Earth remember the same catastrophe? And here I have to be honest with you, because the truth is debated, and anyone who tells you it is settled is selling something. Some scholars think the stories spread the ordinary way, traders and travelers and conquerors carrying the tale from Mesopotamia outward, each culture making it their own. Others think different people simply live the same nightmare independently, because rivers flood, and the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates flooded catastrophically, and often, in a flood that swallows your whole known world feels, to the people who survive it, exactly like the end of everything. And maybe it is both. Maybe a real disaster, burned into memory, met a story good enough to carry it down the centuries. And that, finally, is what I want to leave you with, because it turns the whole thing back toward you. We did not keep telling the flood story for 1,000 years because we love sad endings. We kept telling it because that is what humans do with the things that terrify us. We turn them into stories so we can hand the warning to the people who come after us. Every culture that lived beside water that could rise and take everything did the same thing you do when something frightens you. They made it into a tale and they passed it on. So the flood you grew up with is not a lie, and it is not the original. It is one branch, a beloved branch, of a tree thousands of years old, with its roots down in the clay of ancient Iraq, and you, sitting here right now, hearing it again, are just the latest person to receive it. The newest link in a chain of storytellers that stretches back past the Bible, past Gilgamesh, all the way to some terrified survivor in the mud, telling the children what the water did so they would remember. So, tell me something down in the comments and be specific, because I am genuinely curious. Which version of the flood did you hear first as a kid, and from whom? And does it change anything for you to learn there is an older one underneath it? Or does it somehow make the story feel even bigger? I think your answers are going to be a flood of their own. This is Mythsticks, where the old gods always turn out to be stranger, and far more like us than we were ever told. If you want to keep meeting them, subscribe, and I will see you on higher ground.